Well, good afternoon, dear colleagues. I would like to apologize to the English language audience that my slides will be in Russian and I will speak Russian, but as a minimum you'll have this simultaneous interpretation, and as far as slides go, they'll be quite evident as I speak. So what this conference is all about, what we all deal with outside the conference. We fight all sorts of threats that happen from different government actors or private actors who are trying to use all the different ways to inflict damage to industrial sites, whatever industry they are. They are paying a lot of effort to that. We also try to fight these threats. But when we are good at doing what we are doing, and when it's okay, when all contracts are met, no technology processes suffer, business and sometimes even our management ask us a question: why they're paying us? Why are we dealing with something that's not really happening? Because business isn't always able to put A and B together. So they see if there's no damage, they don't understand that it's an exact result of the activities of the security service. And here we come to the topic of assessing our performance, the effectiveness of what we do, how to show ourselves and how to show within the IT security service and how to show to business that our activities are indeed effective. And when it comes to measurement, when we try to say, so these risks or these threats are indeed important for us, whereas those are not, quite often they use matrices just like this one, and many of you are familiar with these matrices from different risk management risks. They look fine on slideware, and it's quite easy to present them. But when it comes to thinking about what sits behind each of these cells, why and for which reason somebody has decided this risk is improbable, or why they thought that the damage due to this risk is catastrophic. And here we immediately get into a lot of questions. And for the most part, these matrices only work in one case: if we have credits, if we have trust of the person that we're presenting. If there is trust, we don't think where they took their initial data. We trust them and invest our resources and time. If we don't trust them, then unfortunately this schematic works against those presenting it, because they start referring to their expert experience. But if you have no trust to the expert, then obviously you don't have any trust to the whole measurement procedure. And the problem is in that we often think about security as something abstract. This painting by a great Russian painter Kandinsky is very abstract, and try and discuss it in abstract terms. Other than showing the picture, you can spend a lot of time watching it and not saying anything. But as soon as we start discussing it in more specific terms, the picture changes. For instance, you can assess it by the time that Kandinsky spent on painting it, whether he spent a lot of time or not so much, how much money this painting will fetch at some auction, or how many visitors will see this painting if some museum wants to put it on display, and they start planning how to organize the showing. So as soon as we start discussing some specific things, the picture changes. So when it comes to security, we also have to speak about something specific, concrete. This takes two definitions. The first one is about what information security is all about. I like this definition because it's multi-level, and depending on what we mean by each of the elements, it blossoms up in many colors. Information security is a condition of protectedness of the interests of stakeholders in the information sphere, defined by a multitude of balanced interests of person, society, and government and business. Because security is not only about regulation, it's not about working with people, it's not only about reaching out to business, it's all taken together. So based on the interests, the understanding of this term will change. Same thing applies to effectiveness or performance. Effectiveness is a quantifiable contribution to the achievement of ultimate goals. And here you need to understand what goals we set for security. Unfortunately, you can't set a universal set of goals for security because every organization have them different at different points in time. Somebody wants to comply with NERC CIP, other ISA EC 62443. Somebody puts categorizing of the critical information infrastructure elements, trying to send this information to FSTEC, to Russian regulator FSTEC. For somebody, it's about reducing the number of incidents to, let's say, 3 a month. For others, it's reducing downtime from incidents to 2 hours a year on average. And this time can be different for different companies. My targets may go down to dozens of seconds in certain cases, depending on the specific process. So you see, the goals are very different at different times. From the viewpoint of different people, like for a security manager would have one set of goals, ICS manager another set of goals, engineers who run and operate the security tools, or analysts who are sitting in the monitoring center. They all have different sets of tools. Here you don't have a universal set of goals, from which it stems that we're going to measure these goals differently. Measurements are different. They can be operational, that most of us are used to deal with. We have security tools. I have an AV system that runs on HMI. I have a network monitoring system that runs with traffic copies, identifying some attacks. And so I have these solutions that issue some numbers every day. Today I had 100 attacks, and I managed to forestall 99 of them. Yesterday, AV worked twice, and both times malware didn't start. So the metrics are quite easy, simple, and understandable. Very operational, but they don't say anything about how effectively we work all together. It's about the effectiveness of the work of the security tools, but we don't know anything about how many viruses or attacks it let pass through. But at least this data has some value for a higher level, tactical layer, where we estimate not how our technical measures work, but how well the target is protected, the process, organization, or a system, depending on what we are talking about. And one level higher is strategic, involves strategic metrics. Here we are talking about what concerns business. How protected are we? Business doesn't come to us and ask, how many AV attacks you had yesterday? Or how incidents did you have yesterday? They're worried about one simple question: are we protected or not? And if protected, then to which extent? So this is a different set of metrics that we need to show our performance, to show our effectiveness for different target audience and different stakeholders. One for business, one for lawyers, another for contract officers, for heads of IT security, that would be another, for IT or ICS, 4 or 5. So there's no universal set of metrics. They're going to be different in every organization because everybody has their own goals at different times. It's very important to understand this. So expecting somebody to arrive and publish a list of universal metrics, you're not going to get that, especially if we talk about business, because at the tactical level, for instance, you can at least come up with some list list, and then you'll pick and choose what applies to you. But as far as strategic metrics or business metrics, they are very organization-specific. One organization believes it quite okay if they go down, let's say, for 2 or 4 hours. Another one says they can survive 24 hours, but a third one would say they can't tolerate even a minute of downtime. They have to work like to 9/5s, several minutes of downtime a year. So in every organization, there would be a different set of metrics to show performance. What's going to be very effective for one organization is going to be considered a failure in other organizations. And we don't always know how to measure, where to take the source data. Will also have a problem with showing the result of these measurements to the target audience, and most importantly, answering their questions and proving that we are going to provide the numbers that we are promising. So what tactical metrics can we talk about in an organization protecting industrial control systems? For instance, the number of incidents, but not just the number of incidents, because this metric will tell you nothing, because some of these attacks will just be prevented, intercepted automatically. So systems automatically generating a ticket and closing, sending the information to the regulator. It's Gosopka in Russian. In other countries, they have different names. But we're not just interested in the number of incidents, rather with the number of incidents that have involved manual intervention. That would be a metric showing the effectiveness of orchestration automation. It may happen that we've purchased a lot of security tools, but this has not ruled out active needs in human effort. And that will have a lot of different implications. So it's a metric that can generate quite a lot of different conclusions. The next metric, it's a mean time to fix. So it's clear what the incident is. For instance, it's a ransomware that's encrypted data in some supply chain management system, or it's a DDoS attack that brought down some part of the process. We'll have different times to recover. Sometimes it's just to reload the system. Sometimes you can't reboot the systems. You need to interact with some other organizations. If I have no internal expertise to make an investigation, I'll have to attract an external organization. Will require time to make a contract and so on and so forth. So I'll have some average time to fix. Meantime to fix, and then I'll have to use it, because time is always money. It's people. Can multiply the numbers, understand how much to multiply it by the number of incidents. I can at least calculate the conservative estimate of losses that the customer will incur if the employees who need to do their job don't do their job properly, even though their salary is paid, whether they respond to incidents or not. Another metric is mean time to patch. It's very different from enterprise system, where you can install a patch as it's released by the software vendor. In ICS, until the vendor agrees for the patch to be applied, the system is not patched. That actually generates additional risks, and so on and so forth. And finally, the metric of vulnerability management cost. It also includes, apart from the financial measurement, the measurement of time required to fix the vulnerability, including its detection, all the time to patch all the industrial controllers, some execution devices, maybe some personnel workstations. So it's also an integrated metric that will include both automatically generated data and some manual interventions. And depending on the number of this metric, on the value of this metric, we'll make decisions how effectively we are doing it now and understand the dynamic, whether we are dealing with it better than in the past or not so different. So the examples of changes that happen in industrial equipment, like security exceptions, for instance, some exceptions from the approved regulations of introducing changes to industrial equipment, to network equipment that underpins the operation of the industrial segment. Ideally, its value should be zero, but in real life it's never zero, because there are situations where we need to apply changes urgently, and we don't have time to get them approved by the security service. For instance, there's an urgent vulnerability announced. We need to apply a patch, and the vendor has approved, but security say, no, we have a special procedure to verify the patches, we have a lab, we have test benches, you have to apply this. But ICS people say, no, we must apply it, because otherwise they'll cancel support, and so on and so forth. So this is an exception to the approved rule. So the number of such exceptions should be minimized, and we need to keep track of how effectively the security versus industrial control interaction is organized, how good our regulations, maybe our internal rules are so riddled with red tape that we just can't do it effectively, so that security works for security's sake, actually to cover their backside from possible problems rather than doing what they're being paid for by business. Then goes quite a classic metric, even though it's not the main one. It's the compliance metric. There are all sorts of compliances, internal, external. This metric can be binary, let's say 100% or zero, whether we comply or not. Or it can be gray shaded, for instance, 70%, 80%, 100%, depending on the regulation. So this can be changed. It's an important metric, but unfortunately it's very far from real-life business, except for the cases where there is some liability, financial or criminal, for being non-compliant. So in those cases, this metric can play well, showing how effective we are at meeting a goal that's set by the management, for instance, by showing compliance to some regulatory document. In other cases where there are regulations, but there's no liability for breaking them, this metric turns in some dummy, because why should you measure it if nothing happens, if we comply or not? And finally, the last slide with metrics that I can also comment. It deals with the metrics regarding the reporting of incidents and the performance of incidents handling services. How fast they handle the incidents, how many incidents do we have recurring? Because if we have the same incidents recurring, it means that some remedies don't work, or maybe we're not fixing root causes. False alarms within the information system. When a system detects what doesn't really exist. Here we can talk about false identification of what doesn't exist. These are second-degree errors that any system will have. But if you look a bit higher at the incidence level, we can see how effectively the system runs in general. Maybe they're so poorly tuned that we'll have to spend a lot of time and human resources to fine-tune fine-tune these systems to work effectively. Because we can have quite a lot of such metrics, and in the internet you can find whole catalogs of different metrics that are measured in hundreds or thousands. Then we get into a question of how to choose them. There's a classic SMART method to identify, to differentiate between good and bad metrics. I'm not going to dwell on the method in detail. Let me just give you a few examples of good and bad metrics according to this method. So specificity. For instance, if we want to measure the number of unsuccessful entry attempts to HMI, it's a bad metric because it's not specific. And here you need to add, firstly, the time interval and the number per employee. In that case, this metric becomes understandable. You are able to compare individual users or departments. Another example, revenue or revenue impact on the ICS security. Basically, you can even calculate ROI, but on the whole, it's not really very relevant. It's easier to calculate the happiness of employees. For instance, how convenient it is for different employees to work with the security system on a scale of, let's say, 1 to 5. So we set a target of 5, and everybody said that security people are only standing in the way and they're not comfortable doing their daily job. Then the level would be at the level, let's say, 1 or 2, which means that we have to strive for something. And if everybody says that, we are at about, for instance, if we set the target value of 4.5 and everybody has given the value of 4 or 5, it means we're okay. Attainability. For instance, the lack of incidents in the specific process throughout a quarter is a metric that would be unachievable, because we all know that bringing the number of incidents and attacks to 0 is impossible, unless, of course, you hide them. So you need to choose something more realistic. And in every organization, the number of incidents will be specific. For instance, somebody will have the number of 5 per quarter, somebody would agree to 10, others to only 3 incidents per quarter, but in each sense, the value of this metric will be different. And finally, another example, this metric should be relevant. People quite often count the number of security projects. So within ICS, that we start categorizing, we start on audits of IT or OT systems. We start implementing some security systems. So we have lots of projects, and it's good. But on the other hand, on the whole, I think we are not to be concerned about the number of projects that we started. Probably we should be interested in how many projects we completed within time and budget. So this metric would be of much more interest to us, showing how effectively we're spending the money and time, the resources allocated to us by the company. What next? How to move from these hundreds of operational metrics to 1 or 2 strategic ones. For this, there are different approaches. One of those that are quite well, that's been in operation for the past 4 years, is the EPRI, Electric Power Research Institute research program, which has published reports over several years showing how, from a high level of understanding the metrics and IT security measurement in industrial systems, although it has a focus on electrical power industry, but it can be applied to any sphere related to industrial systems. So the methodology described in 4 parts here allows coming from the top to the very bottom, from operational metrics with specific formulae to strategic metrics. And it defines specific metrics and specific calculations, specific formulae, how to calculate it all. So one of the examples, for instance, this research identifies 3 strategic metrics. They are comparable with what's described in the CIP and DIST programs, so neutralization, detection, and response. So these are strategic metrics. So there are 3 of them. Then they are translated into tactical metrics. Each tactical metric implies a certain number of operational metrics. This is just an example. There are actually several dozen of tactical, and for operational metrics there are even more. And then these metrics are translated into specific numbers that we can take from different security tools or from ICS systems or IT systems that we use. Number of virus attacks, number of phishing attacks, number of DDoS attacks, number of unauthorized entry attempts to some elements of the industrial network. There are formulae that allow bring it all together, and there are even tools that allow automating the calculation. So measurement becomes measurable, more or less. And what's important, this process becomes repeatable, so you can indeed build it into the IT security effectiveness measurement process in the company. But there's a subtlety. All these metrics, even though they're called strategic, they're talking about the program of providing information security organization. So it's security measurement for security people. So there's not a word here about what business needs. And business, in spite of what we always say, the business doesn't understand security, actually it understands it quite well. This one shows key components of the process related to water management, water supply, sewage, and if you take a look at the key elements here, you have a number of key points that are important for business. Uninterruptedness, and here we go specifically to security, the verification of measurements, because if you bill the consumers for water or sewage and other resources, the financial flows will depend on the accuracy of your measurement. So one would think it's a technical process, but it's actually quite understandable for business. And in terms of security, you clearly see purely technology-related things shown in red arrows, and compliance-related areas are shown by green arrows, such as compliance with the law on critical data, personal data, if we're talking about providing water to private individuals, and so on and so forth. When we go next step to show to business, our goal is to show to business how well we've done our job. And here it's important to go away from the level of detail that we are dealing with as technical people, from all those spreadsheets with numbers of incidents, numbers of attacks, phishing attempts. Business is not concerned with them. Business is interested in what's going to happen if it happens, and what to do if it does happen, and then what to do for this not to happen again. Business operates with different terms, and these terms are time in the first place, because it translates into money very well, and money as such. For instance, money lost because you have not fulfilled the contract. For instance, a refinery, they attacked it, it stopped shipping products, didn't meet the contract, and liability has occurred. Or another industrial factory with ransomware attacking its management system, so the system stops, you stop shipping your products, and again we break the contract. Or another case that happened in Russia, in one company, a whole train load of iron ore was stolen, and they still don't know where this train has gone. 45 cars with iron ore costing quite a lot of money. It went away because the supply chain management was attacked. It went down for 41 minutes, and this time was enough to take this train from the station, and they still can't find it. So these are specific financial losses that business understands quite well. It doesn't matter for it why the attack happened, and quite often it doesn't matter who's responsible, although it's always a pleasure to punish the culprits. But you want to get your money returned in the first place. So business operates with other terms. So talking about IT security terms, it could be translated into business metrics, reducing costs, reducing losses to run our business. Because running costs or reducing the costs is not only about security for business. It means worker productivity and so on and so forth. There may be very different very many different variations for business. But they will be translated in the way shown on the slides. And then our goal is go away from the measurements that we use to run technically, time to response, time to recovery, to business terms. For instance, downtime that can be elementary translated into money lost, and contractual damages, which is also quite easy to understand for any business person. But here you shouldn't forget that not every downtime can lead to a contract being broken, because in every process is different. In some processes, downtime need not be translated into financial loss. And when it comes to calculated losses on information from information security, I try to derive several different types of such losses. First, loss productivity. It's easy to understand to business, and in IT security, it refers to downtime and bad emotional situations. It's response. Any response is about costs, to spend money on repairing the equipment, reaching out to the public, to the media, and so on. It all costs money. Equipment replacement, information replacement. For instance, if ransomware has encrypted my data and I have a month-long backup, then it means I need to recover a monthly set of data, and probably I'll have to do it manually. So I'll assign employees for that. They will spend perhaps the same amount, a little bit less, to enter these data. So it's a clear metric that will show how many people I need, what salary I have to pay them, and that's all translates into losses to replace this information. Penalties, another thing that concerns business, and many Russian companies use it when they say, look, I have the code of administrative rules, and for instance, if you don't comply with Article 12.13 to provide the required information, business will be fined by 20,000 rubles. And business says, 20,000 rubles? I don't need the security, because if I need to pay tens of millions of rubles into security and the penalty is only 20,000, I can pay this amount every day, and the amount will still be less than I'll have to spend on IT security. Another thing, if we're talking about criminal, prison terms, if you risk getting to prison for 10 years, then you start thinking. Then competition, reputation, goodwill, also something that you can estimate, even though depending on the organization, the word reputation is not always applicable in this country. And then when I translate this to the losses language, I can prioritize my efforts, depending on what kind of incidents I want to start with. I could use a scale of 5 or more, and here are the different parts of the situation where I get. So if the incidents fall in the right side of this line, I paid more attention. If on the left, I can close my eyes to it or refer to some third party, or maybe not do anything at all, because the damage I'm going to incur is going to be less than I'm going to spend fighting it. But it's clear that far from always I can estimate everything in money terms. There are tools to measure it differently. So it's room for you yourself to ask a question. What will stop or slow down operations in your organization? What will will bring a loss in profits margin or something compared to your business goals, because not all companies have the main mission of main goal of increasing the profits. Somebody wants to gain a higher market share, others some other thing. So it's important to understand if such a risk will affect our business. What will bring about a reduction of quality? For instance, if defendants affect the recipe of some product during the process, maybe the situation where the products will become hazardous. There have been examples like that, including Russia, where in one food company changes were made into the recipe, and the products that were shipped to retailers led to a number of people being poisoned. So it's also a problem that information security had to deal with. And then we can understand that apart from the financial dimension, we get others. For instance, breaks in or downtime breaks in the work with a specific number of customers, operations downtime, inflicting damage to people. For instance, within NERC, CRP, one of the metrics is exactly about estimating the number of customers that suffered from not being supplied electric power. Data loss, it also has to do with our topic. Customer churn, losing market share, reducing productivity by a certain percent. So this system allows me prioritizing my efforts, focusing on the most important things. In terms of the duration, the time parameter. Generally speaking, it's always very useful to measure the time. Downtime, uptime, transaction time, operation time. It's clear that in terms of the process time, we start the time from the beginning of attack to its end. But in terms of business, you need to count the time for a much longer period, because if I've suffered from an attack, it's not immediately that I'll repeat my regular business activity level, because I'll have to think, I'll have to spend some time recovering. So if we change the time parameter in this way, my losses are also becoming higher, and most importantly, business starts understanding them in this case. They understand that, yes, if business has been affected, its customers will not come back immediately buying these products and services at the same rate as before the attack. And this calculation allows you showing the seriousness of all the attacks that we're dealing with. And then, depending on a specific organization, on the production process of the industry, I can get some industry related business metric. For instance, this one is about the reduction of power generation in megawatts. So for this metric, I will change or refer to this metric, I'll change the activities and measures. And the example below comes from one Russian company where the CEO is measuring all the effectiveness of their security service, about how often they get to press with negative reviews. If they believe everything's fine, they say security is working. But as soon as there's a news story or some article that an incident happened in this organization, so it's a security problem, so they immediately get bang on the head from the management. It's a specific metric. It's applicable to only some specific people. It not always have strict logic behind it. But this one shows that this example shows that at the business level they can assess the effectiveness in very different ways. How else can we measure if we don't have the financial measurement or the dimension? You can compare yourself against your competitors. It's a very popular subject, security benchmarking. So it's when the manager says, how is it going with someone who we compare with? Unfortunately, Russian doesn't work because we don't have this benchmarking baseline, even though the big four companies offer this service quite actively. If you want to compare yourself with your likes across the world, they have the statistic. But on the whole, this picture has very little to do with real performance management, even though you can still use it for specific goals. If we're a bit worse off than our competitors, then we need additional investment. Or maybe we're better than competitors, so we say we're better, which means that it had been a good decision to allocate funds. So these are the 5 metrics that are understandable to business. They're not financial, and they can be easily calculated. And business understands them perfectly. As soon as we say that I have some processes, services, assets important for business, but they're not covered by remedies, then business says, why are they not covered? And we say, look, you haven't given us the funds, and they start thinking. And of course, it's always a stick with 2 prongs. If there's something more attractive investment-wise, they can spend there. But on the other hand, they can spend on you. But that depends on how effective you are communicating with business. Trust is also comes in very handy here as well. And in conclusion, what would I like to say? There are a number of typical errors made in measurement. It's mostly, the first one is that the business is not focused and you pick too many metrics instead of those that are relevant to the specific organization. So in order to handle these problems, we need to identify 3 key factors of success. We need to understand what we do in information security, and I believe we all understand this. We must understand the business of our enterprise, what can impact its security. We must understand our target audience for CFO, CXO, CLO, measurements and metrics will be different. And we need to be able to combine all 3 elements together. And then you'll be able to talk about measurement in the business level. Unless you do that, we stay at the measurement of our own effectiveness, which is only important for ourselves. So, if we manage to bring together these 3 components, we are going to get a new perspective at what security is doing, both in the enterprise environment and the industrial environment, and we'll be able to see what you can't see immediately. Just like in this picture, somebody see a couple looking at the lake as their future. So this picture embodies the information service. But others see a baby, the contour of a very young baby, which shows a new view at how you can position security, and not in terms of the usual threat management, but a way to improve business performance. This is all I wanted to say, colleagues. Thank you very much.